right, welcome to the book club, and I am so honored and blessed to be able to introduce my two friends. So Braeden Moore was actually the one who told me about this wonderful book. So Braeden, yeah, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for telling us about this book. And I'm going to pass it over to Kieran to introduce himself and tell us why he wrote this book, and just thank you for joining us. I can't thank you enough.
Merci, Michelle. Merci. I'll speak a little bit in Doggerel. So, what's on? So good day. What's on? Clincho. Don't slow you. Siningre nezindi. Merci, cho. I'd like to thank everybody how much you enjoyed the book and what you've said so far. It's remarkable. It really touches my heart, and that this book reached out to so many people, far beyond my expectations. Merci.
Well, you know what? So your son, he took me to go see Leela Gilday, and
yes.
Who was there but Leonard Kenny. And Leonard Kenny taught me to say my name of Red Thunder Woman, and it's Dekots Nagotine Sigu. And he said, all you people down here have your wrong emphasis. So I know it's going to take me some time to learn how to say that properly, and rightfully so. He gave me a good rib. So we're going to get there, but I really love hearing, like, I haven't been able to learn my language. So so my granny went to Fort Providence, Sacred Heart, and then I had an aunt and an uncle that went to one of the Anglican residential schools. So I know my granny knows her language, and I know my mom somewhat understands it because she'll speak it around her, but she doesn't know how to speak it either, actually. She went to the Catholic school in Yellowknife. So my great-grandfather was Milo Biwo. That's my family. I don't know if you know them.
I don't recall that name off the top of my head.
Sure, that's okay.
Yeah,
So that you know, I have lots of family up there. My Auntie Teresa, she's going to get married here at the end of July. So I'm going to head back up there. I hope. We'll see. We're trying to make it work.
Wonderful.
We'll see. Yeah. So I was thinking that, I don't know if you want to read about part from one of your a passage of your book, but
I'll just acknowledge one thing that
sure.
Like I'm in Peterborough right now, and it's Treaty 20 land of the Mississauga and the Anishinaabe people. And I just thought I'd add that too.
That's wonderful.
When we get into it. Yeah.
You know, you did this one part here about Ray Lakes, and I wanted to tell you my middle name is Ray, spelled this way, because and my mom, she named me that, and I was always embarrassed about my Indigenous heritage. So I was like, can we change it to Rachel or something, Michelle Rachel? And then when I obviously started to walk down the red road and understand why my middle name was Ray the way it is, I'm obviously very proud of my middle name now. So I'm hurt that I wasn't proud of it at all. But there's so many great stories here to talk about. And one of my favorite parts about your book was that you literally can just read one chapter while reading or drinking a coffee. You know, like it's such a fun, easy read, and you're such a good storyteller.
That's how I wrote it, in the coffee shop. I went for coffee and I'd write something down, and the next day I'd go for coffee and I'd write it down. So that's why it's good to read in the coffee shop.
Oh, it's so good to read. It's so fun. My husband has like this book about Frank Fence Post, and it's a really fun read. But this one, like I just feel like I went hunting with you. I went on the caribou hunt with you.
That's wonderful.
And you know, and I know my uncles, and I know they're funny. So I can just imagine all these uncles being like, can you believe this guy? He actually like had a whole dog pack without a lead. Can you believe this? Like I totally can picture this happening. So. What are are some of your favorite memories that are in this book that you'd like to share?
Oh, myself. The most memorable one was with the gentleman called Jimmy LaCorde, and it was one of my first trips into the Barren Lands, and we had traveled for miles and miles in portages and portages, and the actually one particular portage, it was with the fellow called Harry Simpson, and we got to the last portage before the Barren Lands, and it was an enormous hill, and we were all exhausted, and one of the fellows says, this portage is 3 miles long, and we don't stop. And I thought, 3 miles with a 22-foot canoe on your back, and two people with a 22-foot canoe, and it was a huge, heavy canoe. And the fellow in front of me was 15, 20 years older than me. And he was an old man in my eyes. He's much older. And I was just a young buck of 21 years of age. And he says, well, grab that end of the canoe, basically. And I grabbed the other end of the canoe, and we started going up the hill. And I thought, I can't do this. And it's just, you're looking at the dirt. The dirt is right in front of your face, and the canoe is up there, and he's up there. And you're on an angle like that, and the canoe is like this. Anyway, the long and short of it is, I could see his knees going like this, like water. And he says to me in Doggerib, he says, can you keep up? Can you keep going? And there was something in the tone of the voice that it spoke so much more than can you keep going, as much as to say, don't give up. There was something in the tone, like, if you give up, I have to give up. And it's that, if you keep going, I have to keep going. So it's that teamwork, that effort to make it to the top. And I wanted to drop the canoe right there. I wanted to give up, but it was the tone of his voice. And I'm looking at his knees going like this. I think we gotta drop it. And I said, no, keep going. So when he made a motion forward, I naturally went forward with that motion. And then when I made a motion forward, he naturally went. So you're helping each other. And the whole trip was all about that, helping and working together as a unit. And we got to the top of the hill, and he said, can you keep going again? And I was thinking, we made it to the top. Like, I mean, that's enough. Like, I mean, this is a humongous hill. And I remembered what the young fellow told me just before we left. It's 3 miles long, and we don't stop. And I thought, there's no way I can do this. But again, I said, okay, I'm okay. And he took a step, and I took a step. And 3 miles later, we made it to the lake. And it pushed you past any boundaries you'd ever imagined that you could do, and you would ever normally push yourself to. And it was by pushing yourself, you're helping him push himself, and him pushing himself is helping me push myself. And together you make it. And it was done. Like, it was truly amazing. And then you make one more trip back and get all your gear and come back. And instead of putting it down, lifting up, putting it down and lifting up, you got it over with. You got the job. As we were saying, the old fellow, Jimmy LaCorde, later on in that trip was the most emotional thing that ever happened to me was when there was, we went out to look for caribou, and we, like, all of the people that were traveling on this trip all went out different directions. And him and I and one other fella, a young fellow, came along, and a big snowstorm was coming in, and we could see it in the distance. It was just a big black cloud. And as we walked along, we see it's getting closer and closer. And there was a huge rock, like one of those phenomena where you have hills all over the place, but there's an enormous rock, is bigger than a Volkswagen car, just sitting on the top of the hill. You wonder, how did something like that get there? But anyways, he said, let's get behind the rock. We got behind the rock, and we looked down the valley, and as far down the valley as you could see we've been traveling all day long and hadn't been hearing shots anywhere, so no one's having any luck. And lo and behold, we saw some caribou at the bottom of this hill, and they're coming towards us. And behind them is this big, enormous black cloud. And and normally a snow cloud is white, but this was black. Anyway, we hid behind the rock, and then the caribou got a little bit closer, and then the snowstorm moved in. And because we're on the top of this hill, the cloud is coming down the valley and then into us. And it was the true feeling that you're inside of a cloud. It was an incredible feeling to feel like you're inside of a cloud, not just looking at a cloud, but you're in it. It wasn't like you go get in your car and you go for a ride and a snowstorm comes and you see the snow coming on your windshield. But this was, you saw the cloud there and you're in it, as it approached. The rest of the sky was blue, and then all of a sudden you're in that cloud. And that was a very eerie, strange sensation for me. And I was frozen to the core, like I was shaking. I mean, literally, my teeth were chattering and was shaking. And I said to the young kid behind me, I said, I don't think I could make it. And how are we going to get back to the camp? That's miles and miles away. And now we're in this storm. We don't know how long it's going to be. And then the old man said, come on, it's time to go. But we're in the storm, and the only protection is that rock. And he said, let's go. We're going to get caribou. So we walked into this storm, into this blinding blizzard, soaking wet snow coming down, and we're walking down a hill. And then all of a sudden, he tells us to stop. And like I'm walking along shaking like this, and I look at my gun, and my entire gun, the gun is completely coated with ice. Even the mechanism to get the shells in, coated with ice. I'm coated with ice. You go like this to break the so that you can move your arm. And then he points and he says, he didn't say anything, he just points, and we look in the blizzard, and there's the caribou, and their heads are into the storm. They're all facing into the storm, and they're standing there all around us. We've walked into the middle of the herd. And he said, pick one. And then he goes like this. He says, pick one. And he knows I don't understand everything. But then the young kid I said, what does he mean? And he says, when he goes like that, he says, you look for the caribou with a flat back, not one that his back is arched like that, because that's a fat caribou. The one whose back is arched a little, he's not fat and maybe not healthy, but you look for the fat, and they really like fat, the fat of the caribou. It is primo. And so we looked around. I look at my gun. I've got to hit my gun to get the shells so they'll operate. And we shot the caribou. And after that, I was still shaking. Like each one of us shot one. And I told the young kid, tell the old man I can't make it. Like, how? It's impossible. There's nowhere to make a fire. We can't. How am I going to carry a caribou on my back to the camp when I can't even carry myself? So he tells the old man. The old man turns to him and he says, "Do as I do. Just do as I do." So I thought, okay. So he goes over to the caribou. Now, you ladies, you might not like this, but he goes over to the caribou and he cuts he said, bring a cup. And I get your cup, and I got a cup. And he goes over to the caribou and he cuts the caribou's throat. And first he said a prayer over the caribou. They say a prayer to each animal that died, and they give their spirit up and give thanks that animal is giving you sustenance and that you will live, but he will die to help you live. And so after that, he cut the caribou's throat, and I put my cup there, and the caribou's blood would drain into the cup, and then he took it and he drank it. And I was shocked, and I was disgusted, to tell you the truth. It was just my upbringing that, it looked terrible, and then I thought to myself, what am I thinking? My father's favorite food is blood sausage every Sunday. So what is the difference from raw blood and a blood sausage? What is the difference? And that was how I overcame it. But because of my upbringing, the disgust came out automatically. You know, oh, that's disgusting. You know, kind of thought came into my mind, which is outrageous. But that's everybody's upbringing when you're brought up a certain way. It's just, it's part of, you know, you're not even aware that's how your upbringing. So anyways, I drank that blood, and it was almost hot to the touch, to the lips, like a cup of coffee. And it was incredible, the warmth that I felt go into my stomach, and the strength I was able to gain. And I was able to skin that caribou, and the storm passed, and the other caribous all wandered off. And it was so mystical and so amazing. And we skinned the caribou. You take out all of the caribou, every part of it, except the guts. You take the guts, you take the stomach. Even the stomach there's parts of every gland you can imagine, and you put it into the hide, and you bring this tump line, what's called a tump line. That's the only thing you carry, is a teapot and a tump line in your gun. And what you do with the tump line is you tie it onto the two ends of the hide, wrap the hide around it. You throw the meat and everything in, and then you tighten it up, and then you throw it over your back, and you put it on a rock, and you lean back, and it's over your head, and you carry the whole caribou on your back. There's no straps like that. And like I say, they don't waste a single thing that the caribou has. Like every organ, everything is utilized. And from there, we went back to the camp. But I always think that, you know, on my deathbed, that'll be one of the things that I'll always remember, is the feeling that animal gave its life for me and truly saved my life. And that's what life's all about, you know, surviving and helping each other. And but that old man that did, you know, to have the wisdom to know to go into a blizzard and to know where in that blizzard to go and find those caribou was so amazing. To be so in touch with the land, and so in touch with it, when the going gets hard. Even if you have to go through something harder, you go through that to get to where your destination, what the end goal is. And it was a real lesson, a real life lesson that you'd never learn as a young man in my entire life. I would have never learned that had I not had that experience. And it got me through so many hard times after that, and pushed myself, you know, through hard times that normally I would have given up 100 times. And yeah, those situations between the guy with the canoe going up and the old man and the caribou, it was
Well, it's an incredible story. And I remember when reading that part where you were drinking the blood. And, you know, like I think all of us here, because we're all in Canada, know what it's like when you're out in the cold and you're way too cold, and then you finally get that hot drink, and
yeah.
how that would change everything. So I remember reading that and thinking, like, that's that hot chocolate you never expect is going to be so good.
Yeah.
Well, I invite to open this up. So maybe you know, Susan, I seen you kind of nodding along, and Kathy and Braeden. Obviously want to give Indigenous voices a chance to reflect first. So if you want to unmute yourself and talk about your highlight of the book, and ask the author any questions, now would be a great time. Although Braeden, I guess you talk to him every day, but.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Yeah. This book, it's like I talked to my dad through the whole process of this book. And even before he wrote it down, these are the stories that I grew up with. It's like I remember hearing about the Horn Plateau, and I remember hearing about the snow fairies, and I remember hearing about the rat canoes, and it's so awesome. I'm so proud that I'm just so proud. all the pictures are amazing, but it's just, I know there's so many different, it's like I can't even pick a single part that I like out of it. It's like everything, like how he ended up in the north, how Kieran ended up into the Northwest Territories. That was, yeah, that was, there's no words to describe it. But yeah, no, it was just, and then hearing about like how he worked at the gold mines, and then like he ended up going out to Gamity, which is Ray Lakes. So he ended up going out to Gamity, and he built like, it was so awesome. He went up there like just wanting to build a life, like going up there because he wanted to build cabins. And this is like an Irish guy who just doesn't know nothing about the bush, and he just like picked up and went up there. And several times people have told him like, no, turn around, turn around. No, he didn't. He didn't turn around. He went up there and he had like $20 to his name and his vehicle, and he built a life for himself. And it's like so many of the buildings that he built as a carpenter up in the Northwest Territories are still standing to this day. Like there's still buildings in Betchakol, Ray Edzo that are still standing. There's buildings in like Snare Lakes and like Gamity that are still standing from my understanding. There's buildings in Dene that he's built, and it's awesome. But I guess like a few of the stories, or a few of them that really stuck with me since I was a child, was have to be the Horn Plateau experience. Walking 73, 78 miles, not kilometers, miles. It's like, it still gives me goosebumps thinking about it, because it's like, I just don't know. It just gives me goosebumps thinking about all of these things. And just,
Yeah,
yeah,
I've been up to Yellowknife twice that I remember, and you know, it's really intimidating to me to be thinking like what it would be like to continue going. So like this would have been what, a couple of years ago already. Like there's no cell service for a good 4 hours at times, and so I don't think people like the group here remember prior to cell phones and party lines. They probably remember that, as opposed to the new generation. Like my daughter would never understand what that would be like in any capacity. And you know, I've been out to Fort Providence, and there's not very many buildings there, not nearly as many as I thought were going to be there, considering it was like a headquarters for the RCMP, the Catholic Church, and then the residential school. You know, so I would be really intimidated by that. In the summer, it's all fires now. Was it like that when you were up there?
Yes, there was always quite a few forest fires. The year I went up there, there was a big fire between Fort Providence and Fort Ray in 1968, I think it was. And almost everything in that 100 mile, 150 mile stretch burnt out. It was enormous forest fires. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's constant up there. So it doesn't seem like there's enough firefighting resources, but that's another conversation. Susan or Kathy, did you want to reflect at all about reading the book?
Sure, I'll go. Sorry, I don't see Susan at all, so I don't know if she wanted to go or not. But there was just so many things that it was so many great stories in there. I got a good chuckle out of the Raven and how you know, the kids had to teach it to say swear words. So that was kind of a sad one, but I mean, I enjoyed the beginning part of that story a lot. And I guess I just found throughout the whole book how fearless the people traveling by dog sled had to be, like to go across water. Like, I mean, I went ice fishing once in a vehicle, and I was wanting to jump out. I'm telling them, stop, let me out. I want to get out because I could hear the ice cracking. I can't imagine like going across open water to an ice floe. That would just be beyond my capacity to force myself to do something like that. Yeah, so just the basic, the bravery of everybody to travel is just phenomenal. But one thing that really stood out for me was right at the end when Josephine Rabiska, when you were telling her stories, when she hunted the moose because all the men were away hunting. And so there's this older woman and what, her granddaughter or something, and they're in a canoe with a knife wrapped around a pole and they're hunting a moose. Like that just blew me away. Like, again, how brave. Like, I guess you got to do what you got to do to survive, but I can't imagine. Moose are so big to, even if it's swimming and it can't turn around really fast, I'd be terrified to be going in a little canoe up to try and kill a moose. And then you have to drag it out of the water and get it up there and all that stuff. I'm like, wow. It's like, it's so humbling, you know, like the just amazing. I really loved all of your stories. They were so good. Thank you so much for writing this book and for being here tonight and talking with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And when you think that those women, they would lived with, there'd be no welfare back in those days. There was no housing. They literally lived in a tent year round, summer and winter. And the odd person would have a log cabin, not too many in her generation. And like you have your children on the land as you go, you know. It was an incredibly tough life, but they had it down to a science, and they worked in harmony with nature. When you think of the whole of the United States and Canada and North America, and you think of how the First Nations people would have lived in harmony, complete harmony with nature. And like the old man, Alexi, when I asked him, why didn't they have lots of dog teams, like 7 or 8 or 10 dogs in a dog team? And he said, well, there was no metal back then. And if you have no metal, you have no dog chain. And if you don't have a dog chain, how can you have 7 or 8 dogs running around your tent? And where are you going to keep your meat to make dry meat? So things were in balance. They had 2 to 3 dogs that they could trust or they could keep an eye on. And the idea of that, in truth, the introduction of steel and metal into the North America, when the odd person that would have a copper arrowhead, but in all of North America, there was very, very little steel of any kind being used for anything. And it was that introduction that changed this entire, with the population of people coming. And that game that they played was called Sequine. And that's where the fellow chased me around with an axe. And the whole point of that game afterwards was explained to me that the medicine men who used to play Sequine, it wasn't a game, it was for real. And this is just a carry on from it. And they said that if somebody went and traded with a white man who no one had even seen yet, like they would go down south and trade with the white man and then come back and tell their people, you know, there's these people, they're weird, they're white, and they got all these fancy things. And and you'd bring back a pot, and you could actually put a pot on something on a fire and boil water in it. Like, it was unimaginable. Well, I mean, how easy would it be to become addicted to getting a pot of tea? You know, every woman's dream would be back then, you know, I could actually boil water in a pot. So it was a dream come true to them. But the medicine men could see what this was bringing. They understood that these conveniences are going to bring so many changes to our land, to our people. And they would get mad. And they found out that that person had a pot, they'd smash it to pieces. And then, you know, the women would be like what's going on here, man? I like my pot. And so someone would bring him a pot again. And they hear the medicine man, he was a traveler. Now, you know, he'd be traveling from what do you call it? Forget the name of it when you have a clan. People lived in little small clans, and he would travel from clan to clan because they didn't live in huge campments. They lived in little campments because the land could only sustain so much fish and so much hunting and fishing in a certain area that people that there was no big tribe in one area that congregated, except maybe for special occasions. But the tribes would be, they'd cover the land, they'd be everywhere. They utilized the land. They utilized every inch of the land, and they knew the good spots to live on. And so that's why they were dispersed. But there would always be a chief or a medicine man that would travel around and check on everybody and tell them what's going on and what changes are taking place and where the caribou are and things like that. And so the medicine man would come along and he would look around and he'd see there's no pot, but he wouldn't believe them. And he'd take his spear and he'd walk around, and they said they could, the story was told to me, you could bury that pot 3 feet in the ground, and that guy would come with a spear and he would shake all over like that, shake where that pot was and dig it up, and then he'd smash it all to pieces. And when you first hear the story, when they told it to me, the young fellows that are explaining the story to me and how it was told to them, they weren't aware of, and it took me years to try and piece it together, to think of like, why was he doing that? It was just what he did, right? But nobody really thought about why he did it. But when I think back, they were medicine men, and they knew what was coming. There was change coming, and they wanted so much to stop that change, and they knew the importance of it. And it's so seeing into the future and so incredible when you think about it. It seems like such a silly little game, but it has true, deep meanings of the survival of North America and the survival of the planet, because they lived in harmony with nature, and there's no pollution, and there's no overkilling. There's no, it's just a very good way of living. Yeah.
I always tell people that the Garden of Eden was here until colonialism. Susan, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yes. I was really interested in the whole relationship with the dog sleds and the dogs, because when I look at historic pictures, I always see the people with their dogs and how they are working for us at that time to transportation and for the hunting. So I'm interested in how you came to relate to these dogs, getting them hooked up and being respectful of them, because they're big and strong, and you wouldn't want to be between them and a fish or something for their food, or between two dogs. But I'm interested in how you came to have this relationship with the community and then learned how to run behind a dog sled. Sounds very, very energetic and physically taxing. My cousins did organize a dog sled run between La Ronge and Prince Albert about 20 years ago or so. So I guess we're still keeping our hand in. So could you just explain your relationship and your history then with the dogs, dog sledding, and the respect?
I think it was just, when I first landed in Ray Lakes and saw dog teams and saw people utilizing them, I became absolutely fascinated with it. I just was astonished of what they could accomplish. Like they would haul logs when I was building buildings there. They would haul logs with the dog teams and the distances they traveled. And it was in the springtime then, it was on sheer ice. But then later years, when they go for caribou and that, and they go like right into the barren lands, 100, 150 miles. And sometimes, like the one trip we made, we traveled all day, all night, and all day again, because we had run out of food and we hadn't seen caribou. And the astonishment, the strength of these dogs was incredible. And as we got into the second night, I told the guys in front that I was traveling with, that I don't think my dogs can make it. There's no way. Like haven't fed them. There's no, they've got nothing to eat, and they're slowing right down, and I can barely keep up to you guys. And the guy said to me, he said, "Don't worry." He said, "Tonight's a full moon." I said, "What's the full moon got to do with it?" He said, "When those dogs see their shadow, you wait and see. Their pace will pick up." Well, the dog harnesses I had all had bells on them across the back. You have bells, and all you could hear as I'm going was cling, 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 and then I'm in my sled and I'm covering up and I'm looking ahead and get off and run behind and then catch up and we're getting. You can only do so much running. You're exhausted. You try to give the dogs a break, but then you find you can only do so much. So I get back in the sled and cover up, and then all of a sudden it gets dark, and then the moon started to come up, and then as soon as I was watching the moon and to see what the guy was talking about, he says when they see their shadow, they'll pick up speed, and the moon comes up, and sure enough, I could see the dog's shadow, and then I could hear ching. Ching, 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 ching. It was unbelievable. Whatever it is, they're competing with the dogs beside them in their mind. You know that's the pace. Who knows? But it was so factual, so real. It was mesmerizing, and how the people know, all these things about nature and working in harmony with the creatures that you work with, and. But the one thing that was always treacherous is if you never come between two dog teams, like to stop a fight, you'd never get in the middle to stop a fight. You'd go on the outside and pull your dogs away, but you'd never go in the middle and try to stop the fight this way. So that was the one thing I could warn you about. And then the type of gloves that people wore, they wore a leather glove. Everything was handmade. But they had a gauntlet glove, and the gauntlet glove comes up to about here, and it's like this part here would be caribou hide and easy to work with. It's like suede, and but this part here they use moose, and they I can't remember what they sew inside there, but it was very stiff. And the whole principle behind that is that when the dogs are fighting, that if you get in there, the dog goes for your wrist. And he doesn't break your hand so much as he goes for your wrist. So you're trying to stop two dogs from fighting. They will go to bite you. Well, you're wearing that gauntlet glove. You won't be bitten. It won't go through and do as much damage. Yeah.
That's
Hope
great.
that helps.
Thank you. Could you talk about there's how the people shared their stories and in that way navigated through the land without maps. So you did talk about some of that in the stories. Could maybe just relate another story around that?
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. You sit down at night and the elders tell stories, and they'll talk about the creation of the world, and they'll talk about Yamaza, who created the world, and he was a giant, and he traveled around the world, and what he did, and as he traveled, and so you'd get to when you get to a certain like when you're traveling by boat to the Barren Lands, and everybody sits around the campfire, they'll talk about that area you're in right now, and they'll say, you see that rock over there? It's a great big rock, and like there's a quartz vein around this. It's literally a hill. But there's a line around it in the stone, like a quartz vein. And they said, well, they'd have a story behind that the Amazon tied a rope there. And I can't remember the exact thing that happened with the rope. But so now the next time somebody says, oh, I saw some moose at such and such a lake, and you'd say, well, whereabouts? Well, it's right near where Yamaza tied the rope. Now you have an identification point. But if all along, every camp, every night, you tell the story of what happened in that area, then you have a story of the entire boat trail. So you know that today you go over this portage and you're going to be at the lake with the rope tied around the rock. And you haven't been there in 3 years. and you travel, you go over a portage and there's no rock there, then you'd know you've gone too far, or you've missed the right trail, and you'd go back and try the other portage. You know, you get stuck at, you know, should we go that way or this way? And by keeping the legend in your mind and this whole story that goes with this trail that leads you to the Barren Lands, you always know where you are in relationship to where the story was, and what to expect next. You know, whether it's a waterfall was near there, or if there's you know, some danger that's near there, you'd be aware, oh, we've got to be, the ice isn't very good around that area, so we should always stay on the right. And the reason is there'll be a legend beside that too. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll open it up then to some other folks. So maybe we'll just go in order. Barbara, I don't know if you want to come online or ask a question, or just tell your thoughts of what you got a chance to read.
I don't have any questions. I'm just thoroughly enjoying hearing the enthusiasm in you telling the stories. It just brings a whole new life to them again, and just really appreciating that. Thank you.
Awesome. Kat, did you want to talk about the book from your point of view, or maybe ask a question?
Yes, I also loved this book. I love that there were pictures in it as well. And I want to thank Braeden for coming to the meeting too, to share his perspective on the stories as well. I was super impressed by your commitment to the lifestyle and to the people, and also the Dog Rib people's complete resourcefulness, as you've been talking about how they worked in harmony with the land. And it just, yeah, it's a bit sad that we have not been able to experience that or do that ever. And I found this book a really great example for settlers, to show them the commitment it takes to build relationships with Indigenous people. So I want to thank you for that. That's all.
I don't know if you want to reply there, Kieran. Rosemary, you'd be up next.
No, I really appreciate everybody's comments, and it's so meaningful to get these kind of feedback from so many people. It's really, really, really good. Yeah, it's like the book doesn't make any money whatsoever on my end anyway. The publisher makes money, but it gives the book so much purpose that the money is so not important in any way, shape, or form. It's this kind of feedback that it means the world to me. It's just to be able to carry these stories on and tell them to people outside of the North, but to get the feedback from the North, from some young people, and they're telling me stories like things like, you tell things about my father and my grandfather that I've never even known, you know, that no one ever mentioned before. And to get that kind of feedback, that's really good. Yeah.
That's amazing. Rosemary, I don't know if you got a chance to reply yet, but you're up next in the order.
I would like to ask, and forgive me if you've written about this or talked about it already, but why was it so important to you to write this book? Like, it took, the happenings were in the 70s and 80s. I'm not totally clear when you started writing it, how long it took you, but what drove you to write this book?
I moved here to Peterborough, and when I was here, I ended up being invited to a canoe symposium. And when I went to the canoe symposium, I did a presentation, but it was not about canoeing. It was about dog sled trips. And when they presented to me, they said that this is a canoe symposium, but because you traveled on the trails of the same routes that people take by canoe, you're just traveling on top of the water, not in the water. So we welcome you to talk about here at the Canoe Museum, which was really good. A different concept for a canoe museum to do talks about dog teams. And so I did that talk. And when I was there, I had the fortune of meeting a woman who ran a canoe symposium in the United States in a small town in Vermont. And she invited me to come down there. And then I went down there for 5 years, 5 invitations or 5 speakings. And every time I went, everyone would tell me, you should write a book. You should write a book. And so that kind of encouraged me to buckle down. And I unfortunately kept a bit of a diary, and the diary helped me bring me back to the time. And so the diary might have had something that's not really that great a story, but reminded me of something that happened at that time and brought me back into time. And now I see the importance of the story. You know, at the time it wasn't important. I might have been writing down what I was having for supper, or how I made a fire and or a certain location, and then that location would bring back a memory. And then I started digging my mind for the details, and slowly but surely it brought me right back to this time, and I was really able to dig it out of my memory. It became simple. We just started to roll out, and that's how it came about. Yeah.
Thank you. And how did you go about getting permission from everyone after all that time?
I just contacted people, and yeah, there's a few stories that were really good, and I couldn't contact the people, and I had to leave them out. And I had some phenomenal photographs and things like that, and it was just too hard to access that particular person. I wasn't turned down. I'm not even sure if the person was still alive. I knew that it was a family, and I knew that 2 of the members of the family had died, but the third one I wasn't sure, and I couldn't get a hold of her. So it was, yeah, but there's a few stories like that that I couldn't put in. And the publisher also cut it down to 375 pages or whatever it is. And so I had 900 pages. So it has been cut up quite a bit. Yeah.
Well, maybe we could do a part 2.
Oh, I don't know. Thank you for that, but it was a challenge. I have to be honest. If the book would never have been written if it wasn't for my brother in Winnipeg, who I would write the book, the stories, and I would send them to him, and he would translate them, because it's even Google. What's the thing for Google? Spell check. Can't find my spelling. Like I put words in, spell check can't find them. So he translated everything.
Right on. Joanne, do you have any questions, or do you want to reflect back to the author?
What a fantastic book. It sort of delved me into a place I've never been. I've never been camping. I don't hunt, but I was right there with it. It gave me that feeling that these people have been doing this for thousands of years and quite happy to continue that lifestyle, living off the land, being at one with the environment. It was fantastic. And I had to stop at some point and just take a breath and think how spoiled my life is, and what hard work these people on a day-to-day lived, but they were happy, they were very resourceful, they were reducing, recycling, and reusing even before it became a thing. So thank you. Thank you for the book suggestion. It was a great read. Really gave me a great insight. Thank you very much.
Marnie, would you like to respond as well?
I am seriously bummed that you're not considering a sequel. Because when I heard that there were like 900 pages, I would have read the next 2 books of 300 each right now. Yeah, this was quite a book. One of the things I kept wondering is, where did Europeans get so lost? We got so freaking lost, you know? And I was thinking that it's not even what you're describing when you talk about the early days. It was interesting. You could see the transition, right? Snowmobiles started coming in and there was more racism. You started talking more about the racism people encountered and just the whiteness that came in and smashed. And I was thinking, it's not even, this is just my perspective, but of course, but it's not even about being connected to the land. It's that there's not a separation. The people in the land just are, and they work together in a way that is was fruitful. And yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, it was a difficult, blessed, it was a human life. It was a human life. And yeah, I really love that. And one of the things that will stick with me, now I'm afraid I don't remember exactly which story, but it was one of the times when you were frankly crazy and you went out and did something that I think even the people up there wouldn't do. And you know what it was? I think it was when you had to go for help. And the 2 people had stayed at the cabin and you were expecting help and so on. And then you got, I mean, that was, oh my God. But what the image that stays with me is you get to a place where there's a home of some sort. I don't know if it was a tent or a cabin or what. And the woman doesn't recognize you, but you recognize her because she's the one who'd given you the pouch years ago. And she doesn't recognize you because you're so frostbitten and and that the weather had done that much to you that you were unrecognizable. That really, I just have that image, you know, that really struck me. And yeah, so I had a question. I was going to ask, but I think you've kind of answered it. So just that how you stay in touch with the people up there. And I was going to ask where you live now, but you've said Peterborough, I think you said. So, yeah, just how life now connects to the life you had then and what you did then. If you choose to answer that, and that may be too personal or something, you can tell me.
Yeah, I've been back twice for a visit, and it's a hard question to answer. There's personal things in there, but yeah, I miss the North, and I miss that way of life. And unfortunately, even if the people decided tomorrow, you know, let's to hell with the white man and the white man's way of life, we're going to go back to the land, they couldn't, because it's gone from 3 million caribou to when I was there, 300,000 caribou, which was, I couldn't believe how many. And then it's down, like about a year ago, it was down to 3,000 caribou. And there's no explanation. The scientists can't figure it out. And like you figure if you've got 300,000 caribou, if they're not there, you'd find the corpses, right? And if you find the corpses, you'd know what the problem is. And but they never find the corpses. So where did the 300,000 caribou go? And I think back to what the elders told me, and the little stories, you piece them together over time. And the elders, I asked, where do the caribou go? They're always migrating. And they said, well, they migrate up, farther up into the Arctic in the summertime. There's a place there that's all the barren lands will be all free of ice and snow, but that particular spot has these it's far enough north that there'd still be not plateaus, but large areas like top of hills, and the edge, the north side of a hill would have ice on it, and but everything else is thawed out, and they go there to have their calves. And I said, well, why would they go there to have their calves there? And he says, because of mosquitoes. And I said, well, what do mosquitoes have to do with it? He said because when the caribou are born, the mosquitoes are so intense. There's so many millions of mosquitoes that, and I've seen pictures of this on the internet, where you'll see a baby caribou and it's completely covered in mosquitoes, and they kill it. Mosquitoes will kill the baby after it's born because there are so many. And so with these little, in this area that they go, they'd have their babies, and then they nudge their babies, like you see with deer and whatnot, to get the babies to stand up, and they'd be covered in mosquitoes and that, and they'd get them up, and they'd shuffle them up onto the ice plateau, and the breeze is there, and then the mosquitoes wouldn't bother them. And it takes just a little while when all of the phlegm or the secretion from the birth is gone, their hair starts to get loose and everything, that then they could get up on their feet and they'd survive. So you need these little ice plateaus for them. Well, with if you think about it, with environmental change, if the place where the caribou go, I haven't been there since, but if that, in all likelihood, that ice is not there now. So then if they're dying at birth, then that would account for the fact that there are no corpses. And so the population would just decline, and you wouldn't find bodies all over the barren lands of full-grown caribou. So that's my personal theory as to what probably has happened to the caribou. The scientists, I've never heard them explain it that way, but if there's no bodies and there's no other things to explain it, it's not hunters. They, the same thing. You hear people bringing too many caribou back, which it's quite possible with skidoos and with the mines that definitely does contribute to it, but it wouldn't contribute to that much volume of loss.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And as you were speaking, for some reason, another part of the book that will really stick with me is you went out on a hunt with a young man from up there whose name I'm afraid I don't remember who it was, and he had a gun and you had a bow and arrow, and you recognized a path because the tree was pointing, and you had learned that if the point that you don't go that way, you go the other way. And so you knew stories that he didn't know. And yeah, so I think I was really touched by how the impact the Europeans have on the culture. Yeah.
He became the chief land claims negotiator for the Dogger.
Deal.
And he's responsible for all the trips that the people now take to the barren lands. Like it all died off, and no one went there anymore. And it was an annual event, and it was an event that the youth. That's how you became a man as a Dogger. That when if you went to the barren lands with your parents as a kid, when you came back, you were a man. And because of what you went through and what you experienced, and that died off. And he's responsible now. He has been trying to get that people back on the land.
Cool.
And that was one of his mantras when he was trying to do the land claims, was if you don't use it, we lose it. And he kept hammering that at all of the meetings that they had, that when they were fighting the government for their land, and how do you prove that that's our land? We go back and we use it. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. And so he was really promoted that. And he then interviewed every trapper, elder trapper, and they got one young guy to document, and the trapper would say, they put a map on the wall, and he would explain, where did you trap? Where did your dad trap? And they would made a map of every trap line that they could possibly, it might not have been 2 generations ago, but where did they trap? And where did your people, your clan hunt? And they used that when they went to the government, and they negotiated one of the biggest land claims in North America. He was a very smart man, that man that I told him the road goes that way, not that way. The tree's bent the wrong way.
John Bezo.
Bezo. That's his
John
name.
B. Okay.
John Bezo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thank you. Anyway, I love this book and I thank you for it.
And it looked like Braeden made the point that he's been trying to encourage his dad to make a sequel. So yeah, I invite Sarah if you want to reflect at all or ask a question.
I don't really have any questions. I'm just enjoying to hear about all these stories and listen to people's thoughts about this book. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. And Wendy, I invite you as well.
Thank you. Many of my questions have been asked, but I think what I love the most about the book is just the openness to learning that you had all throughout the book, but also this evening as you're talking, I can just see how that curiosity and openness to asking good questions and being ready to hear the answers even when they're not tough answers are good skills overall. And I really loved how you emphasized the importance of relationship building over time. So I really, I loved when you would give us little snippets in the earlier parts of the book on, this will be important later on, and then connect it in to where, I think Marnie gave that great example of when you were unrecognizable, but then you had that item that tied you together. So that was wonderful. And I think what I really liked about what you spoke about tonight was when you're now having young people tell you, there's things they never knew. That resonated a lot for me. I'm noticing as I learn about my own family, the more digging I do, like I'm grateful for any of the writers who wrote letters or other ways that they wrote things down. It gives me pieces to go on, but then connected to that are also the conversations with the people that I know or the conversations I had at earlier times in my life that I now think back and I can have more of the story coming together. So I just loved all those bits that you gave in the book of pieces for people to reflect on if they choose to see it. And so I think the one that I wanted to pull out here that I thought was just so poignant that you included it was the really brief chapter called The Inquisitive One, where you had to have the conversation about where does the money come from. And I just really loved your emphasis at the end there that pointed out that unless people are choosing to see it from another perspective, they just live in these assumptions that they make about what's known. And so I just love that, but I guess I'll just leave it with that. And if you want to say anything further, I'd love to hear it, but certainly got a lot out of the book, but also from the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, is that everybody?
Kathy has a quick question here. If she
Okay,
would just unmute herself. We're getting really close on time here.
Okay. The chapter about the plateau where you were building the cabin and the father and his son, something just feels unfinished, unsaid. Like if he was a trapper, why did he show up without like snowshoes and stuff? And I don't know. I was just wondering if there was anything that you can flesh out that's not in the book, because I feel a little bit unsatisfied with that chapter. I mean, it's a good chapter, but I just feel like there's more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there is. It's because there's still some people alive that family members, and but it's no secret. There's alcohol is a big problem in the north, and he was been an alcoholic for an incredible length of time, and he was damaged, and I think he had a lot to do with being brought up in the residential schools, and and yeah, the community itself where he lived, it was a very large problem with alcohol. And that was basically, I didn't want to say too much about it and bring that up, but yeah, that was yeah, he was supposedly he's recorded in the Hudson Bay Company as being the best trapper in the Northwest Territories for a certain thing. I forget what it was, marten, I think it was. He had trapped more marten than anybody else in the Northwest Territories. So he was a very successful, very great on the land, great person on the land, but terrible in town. And that goes for so many people in the North that when they get into town, there goes all sense of responsibility, everything, once the alcohol is introduced. And that's so unfortunate. It's well, just the way it is.
Yeah, thank you. I know you don't have to go any farther. It's just yeah. I was just so curious because I was reading and going, something seems off, like there's more to this story, that, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean to pry though. So, but thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for reflecting and for being so open to talk about this. I might bring Kathy back on, or Katie, sorry, because we have at this point, I guess this is ending our relationship with the Calgary Public Library. Unfortunately, it's been absolutely wonderful to work together with you. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And maybe things will change in the future where people will, or the library will feel comfortable continuing to do online book clubs. But until then, I just encourage people to go to nativecalgarian.com. I did post some links and some books, and I can't see it because I had to switch accounts and such. So if you can't see it, can you let us know so that somebody else can copy and paste it into the comments for everybody? And then hopefully we'll be able to do that, go from there.
I'm seeing it in the chat there, Michelle, so I hope everyone else is as well. I dropped a link to the Native Calgarian website as well. So yeah, on behalf of the library and just on behalf of myself as a person, I felt really honored to be sort of invited into this club and this group of people who are doing this really difficult but important work. And I was talking to Michelle before the program, and I'd like to join the book club, not as a library staff member, but just as a regular person. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, and it's been really wonderful getting to know all of you, and I really appreciate everybody's openness, and I hope to see all of you soon at the book club and elsewhere. So thank you so much, Michelle, and everybody for participating and for leading this book club. It's been a really incredible experience for me. So
awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, and thank you to the Moores. Brady, I see your hand is up if you wanted to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Katie, make sure you get this book in all the libraries.
I'm working on it. I am working on it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great book. So thank you so much to the Moores for coming today. It was such an honor to have people who actually know where my people are from and talking about it, and being able to tell stories. When my great grandmother, she passed away from sickness, and I know her and my great grandfather were loggers at the time, and my granny was like swinging right where she had passed, and she was sick as well. And I really felt like sometimes you could really feel that, where like the atmosphere and how hard those lives were at that time. So I just really appreciate it, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I think you have a fan club of people that would love to see a sequel that would be very committed. So
no pressure.
The
Thank
pre-orders
you
now.
so much for having me. I can't tell you how much this means. It's wonderful meeting every one of you.
Wonderful.
Really wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Masi cho.
Masi cho. I'm going to publish this and send you a link, sir, and then that way you'll be able to look back on it if you wish, or share it with folks that you might want to share it with. So thank you all the folks who are new, who came to this book club, who read the book. I really appreciate it. And I hope we get to see more of you in the future. So have a wonderful time until next time. And then we'll just be on Native Calgarian.